Hi, my name is Jonathan. I am the head of a product management team for a national company. Today, I'm just going to do a little bit of vibe coding. I've done several projects like this, mainly been using Claude 3.7, but kind of excited to be using Claude 4 now. I've done a couple things with it so far, and it seems pretty cool. I am going to just share a couple tips and tricks that I've just learned over the last several of these I've worked with. I've got a fun one today, I think. So one of the things that bothers me is when I go to a recipe website and I have to read through this incredibly long story about the recipe, and I have to navigate all types of ads that honestly mess with the navigation. Like, you can get halfway down the recipe, an ad can pop and it'll shoot you back up to the top. I mean, it's like super duper annoying. I've tried to find sites that are pretty light on ads, and there's a few out there, but a lot of them, I mean, this is just the way it's done because it's the way for them to monetize. But I know that we can do this better. And so I went to Claude. I started out with just the description of the thing that I'm bothered by, my problem statement. And I talk about my idea. So I have an idea for a simple web app that will allow the user to paste a URL in from one of these sites and then go and extract the recipe from it and sort of bypass all of those distractions. And, he said, absolutely, this sounds like a great idea. So absolutely right here. Then he gives me this technical approach. Just first tip, I find it, rather than just dump a big prompt in about the app that you want and let it go, which I've done that, and I've had good success with that from time to time, but I've had better success doing this, is to sort of engage the model with my idea and get some feedback about the idea. And in this case, I'm really glad I did, because his first approach, the technical approach that he gives me, is not really the approach that I want to use. It's not the one I'm after. So the first thing that I see is that it's pretty good on the front end. He said a simple web interface where your users paste a URL and then view clean results. Yes. But there's already some stuff that I wasn't quite nuts about. So the first thing it says is that it wants me to use different tools to do web scraping, like Puppeteer, Playwright. And I don't know, maybe the model's going to use that in the background, but I definitely don't want to have to deal with these tools in my code if I can help it. So while he had a pretty good first suggestion, and he said, hey, do you want me to start building this? I said, not yet. I said, hey, I'm considering those options for now, but aren't web browse enabled LLMs able to just go selectively pull stuff from a website? I mean, why have sort of these middlemen in here? And he says, yes, web browsing enabled LLMs can definitely pull this information. And then he goes and gives me a little bit more information. He says, I'm going to get direct URL access, content extraction, structured output. One thing that I find is that the model is going to probably try to lean you away from expense, right? So it's going to reduce the amount of load that you're sending to the model and give you other tools that you can use. And that's good. I mean, if you're doing something at scale, that's probably the right way to go. This is something for me, my wife, maybe a couple friends. So this is something that I don't mind if I have a little bit of expense here. But what I do ask almost every time I'm doing something with the API, if I write an application with the API, I ask for it to tell me the estimated cost based on the amount of tokens that it's using. I read through the approach that he was going to use. It sounds pretty good. And again, they always will go like, hey, do you want me to go ahead and prototype this for you? And I said, hey, hold on. I would like to try an experiment. One of the things that I found, this is another good tip, is if you're going to go and spend some time programming an application that's going to utilize your API to do things with the models, it's good to actually test this stuff out right here in the chat, because it's going to do a lot of the same things. So what I did, I went to a website. I'm not going to say the brand name, but you can see it here. It's a good site. It's got lots of great recipes, but they are long pages with a bunch of ads. And I get it. That's how they monetize. Good for them. But I grabbed one of the URLs from a recipe. This is a lasagna recipe. And it's actually a pretty long recipe, but I just pasted the URL in here. And he said, I'll fetch that lasagna recipe and extract a clean recipe data for you. I'll provide the cost estimates, because I had asked him to do that. So here you go. You can see in really decent format, gives me the serves 8 people. It didn't give me a cook time. I bet there is a cook time on the site, so it missed that. But then it gives me the ingredients. In this case, there's a lot, so this is actually a pretty big recipe here. Gives me this assembly. Gives me the instructions, which is exactly what you want. And I also asked for it to give me a URL I can use for the image, because in my application, I want to display the image in a viewing pane on the right. And so he gave me the URL here, and I can actually click that URL. I can open it up, and there we have our lovely picture of the lasagna. And then we come down, and we've got our API cost estimate. Essentially what he came down to is I'm somewhere between 2 and 6 cents per recipe. Says I can do something like 500 to 1,000 for 25 to 50 bucks. Probably not going to do that many. I don't know, unless my friends are like really loving this and they're like grabbing a bunch of recipes. But, that's not bad. I mean, and that's totally worth it to me to go get a recipe and save myself the time of navigating all those ads. So as a little personal app that I can use in my own environment, this is going to be pretty handy for me. I had that conversation, but I wasn't quite ready to jump into the app. So I just said, hey, that works great. I need to finish up a couple other projects and then we'll come back. And that's what we're doing right now. We're going to come back. So at this point, I am going to let him just go ahead and start coding the prototype. I am going to give some details about my environment, things like that into the prompt, which should make that go a little easier. I'm not going to sit here and type and take up the time. I'll just let you know when I've got the prompt ready to go. Okay, so I have my new prompt here. Just checking it back over, make sure I don't have anything really jacked up. So I just said, I'm ready to prototype this. I gave it some details about my environment that I'm using. I tell it we're just going to stick with the basics for now. I give it the project name so that it gets all of the name spacing right. It had suggested doing rate limits. That's a little bit more complicated than I want to do right now. So I just said, instead of rate limits, I'm just going to I'm going to have a list of access codes in the app settings that I can give to my friends or use for myself, and we'll time out the access. So I'm just telling it, look, the user can use the access code for 24 hours before needing to provide it again. And, as a nice little thing, I'm just going to have it count down the amount of time left for the user so they know when they're going to have to give the access key again. I did go ahead and have it take care of the privacy page, basic stuff like to account for Google Analytics. But I also said I want to make it clear that we're disclaiming any responsibility for the content that's being extracted, and that the user is responsible for their choices on this front. And also to be very clear that the content is the copyrighted, is owned by the site, and it's copyrighted, and they retain ownership. I did also say that, hey, we should reinforce this by having proper attribution on the front end. And so we're going to do that. I gave it a few other things about preferences. I've been having some problems with the Claude headers for the API in previous projects. So I've just popped in the last version that worked with consistency, because that'll save me from going through a few different iterations to get the right ones. I did ask it to give me a pane somewhere, a small pane that gives me an estimate of how much the API call cost. I told I want a very modern, clean, front end, and then a very readable recipe, and to have an image for the recipe for the actual food, and a couple other little just again preferential things. I asked it to use the site CSS instead of embedding them into the pages. I think that's everything. It's just like, if you get this wrong, it can be something to go and try to clean up. But I think I'm in good shape, so we're going to give that a go. And so at this point, Claude is generating the code. We'll let him do that. One thing, I could actually hit the limit for the amount of response he can give in any one response. If that happens, I just have him start back over, or hit the little continue button. Sometimes the continue button doesn't work, but I'll do that every so often. But he's going to town. I'm going to let him do this thing when all of the files are there. We'll just come back and we'll just evaluate the work that Claude has done. See if we can just get a quick rundown of how he approached this this prototype. Okay, so Claude, again, I'm using Sonnet 4 to do this coding here. And by the way, guys, I do have I have a pro account, and I'm just resistant to paying like, I don't know, the $2,000 something for the other one. I've been doing fine with the pro account. Got a little bit more manual, like back and forth, than using sort of their code environment. Maybe someday I'll go and do the code environment, but also like, look, Gemini's doing some great stuff with code. ChatGPT is doing great stuff with code. It's like hard for me to decide which one we're going to go to. I tend to enjoy working with Claude. I don't know what it is about like just the personality they've got baked in, but it just seems to work for me the best so far. We're just going to review a little bit of what we got here. So we started out with my app settings, which is good. So one of the things that is in my app settings is we're going to put my API key in here, which is a good place for it. It gave me some codes. I am going to change these codes afterwards, but it gave me just a basic set of access codes that I could use. Again, I'll use them temporarily. He puts the prompt in here, which is good. Yeah, it gives me the API URL. So all the basics here, the basics that are needed to do the API call. It gives me, he's even doing like a little bit of like sort of the standard cost, and that'll make it easier for him to estimate the cost of each call. And if the cost changes, I can always come back in here and change the individual costs here. We've got our recipe.cs here. So class that's, it's really giving a lot of these different properties. So it's basically setting out what the JSON is going to look like for each one of these. Yeah, it looks good. Recipe extraction service. So this is the service that'll actually use the other models. Yeah, this is the workhorse. This is the one that's actually going to do the work of calling the API. We've got an access service. Oh, this is the access. So this is a service that's going to govern the access codes. That somebody's going to use the access code. So we've got a service for that, which is good. I do like that Claude knows that Razor Pages is really like given to a good modular approach and does a really good job of breaking up this stuff. Sometimes I have to refactor. On a few of my other ones, we've had to refactor a few times to make it maybe even a little more modular, because as you're adding new features, it tends to add a lot of the code into the same spots or into the same pages, and they just get longer. So I do find myself refactoring a bit from time to time. We've got our program.cs. It looks exactly like I would expect it to look. I asked him to use site.css instead of embedding the CSS into the pages, and he did that. Yeah, it's a pretty robust CSS file here. Here's my layout, which is good. That's gonna be your header and footer. And we've got our index, our main page here. It did get stuck doing the index, so I just hit continue, and it looks like it picked up pretty well. And then we've got the page model for that, the code behind. This is my privacy page and the privacy code behind, and we got an error page and the error code behind. Pretty basic, but it has most of the stuff that I would expect us to need. I'm going to take time now. In fact, I am going to hop over into my SDK, show you basically what we're going to do for the setup there, and then we'll take some time copying this stuff over. So here I've given just a little more space to my SDK here because we might have to bounce back and forth, so I like to keep both of them on the page here. I am going to pick the web app Razor Pages. I gave it a silly name. I call it like Torquipe, so that's going to be Q-I-P-E, just Torquipe. I will configure for HTTPS because I am gonna put this live at least on my my demo page at some point. And I don't need containers, but I think that's probably about right. So here's another tip. I am not a great programmer. I used to be a pretty good programmer. I used to code a lot about 15 years ago. I coded mostly business applications for internal users of our company. I did a lot of coding around, like we were using speech recognition. So I made like this application that helped you tune grammars for the speech recognition. And I saved us a bunch of money by doing that because the tools that were provided by the company at the time were very expensive. And so I did sort of a light version of that, and it worked really well. So I've got a lot of experience in doing practical application. However, I was way out of practice, and when I would try to start coding again, and I did, like, I have a band, you can say I do some music. I would program my website, and I would, labor for hours to get that exactly the way that I wanted it. But what I found is anytime I tried to go back to coding, I spent so much time just trying to get caught back up to the new things, make sure that I was using the right libraries and all the dependencies, and like it got to be a bit of a slog. So it really just was kind of discouraging. But now being able to do this, I'm able to utilize some of my experience back then. I am familiar, I've got familiarity with it, and it's also pretty easy for me to just go and do quick research to know what I'm looking at. But it's just so much easier coding with a partner and me not having to do all the heavy lifting. I do have to sometimes do some troubleshooting, some troubleshooting, debugging, where maybe I'm stepping through the code and just making sure that the variables are populating the way that I want them to. But I'm not. And you're going to see this as I'm doing the work. If you're a developer, you're going to be like, that guy's an idiot, because that's how developers think about product managers and the others that are not developers. That's one of the reasons why I really like working with Claude, is because it doesn't treat me like an idiot. It treats me like someone he's going to help. And I got to say, I love doing application development again. This is really like brought me back in to something that I just forgot how much I really enjoyed doing it. I'm going to be working in Visual Studio. I'm going to just go ahead and create the pages. You can see I've just got my solution here. I'm going to create the pages and copy the code back, right over into the pages, and then we'll pick back up here. We'll see if we've got any errors in the error list, and we'll see how it goes. And just really quickly, for those of you guys that might be really beginners in this, when you're looking here at the code that's been generated by Claude, he's good enough to tell you what directory you're going to put these in. So you're going to need to create a models directory if you don't already have one. You need to create a services directory off the root if you don't already have one. And that's exactly what I'm doing right now. Here's one of the things I found as I was pasting in. I got almost all the way through. I'm actually to my index file now. Even though I had hit continue when it stopped, the second version of the index.cs HTML did not complete. So even the second version, he stopped in the middle of it. So what I need to do right now is go back to Claude and just say the index.cs HTML file is incomplete. Please regenerate it. I'm going to have him regenerate yep, he said you're absolutely right. He can actually go and see that it's truncated. And so now he's regenerating the index.html, but this is going to happen sometimes. One thing though is I'm in a space right now where I'm about to have sun just like beating down on me in here. I'm going to put my API key in. Because there's no issues, you can see it's right here, no issues found in the list here. It might run, it might not. Sometimes there are things missing in the background, just something that is just some logic that's not good, that's not enough to keep it from compiling, but it's enough to keep it from running successfully. So let me just see what happens. Get my API key. I'm going to copy one of these access codes out of here, and we'll see if it'll run. And then if it runs, I'm going to be done for the night. I'll come back and we'll pick up later. But so far, so good. So here we go. The API key is in. I've grabbed one of the little codes that he gave me as a temporary code, and we are about to hit run and see what happens. I don't know that you're actually going to get to see the browser window that opens up from this, but I'll pause and then I'll go. If it runs and I've got a page, I'll pause and I'll go highlight the page so we can actually see it. But let's see if it builds. It should. Nope, there was a build error, so I've got one error. Got one error here. Didn't see it before. Looked like it was clean a minute ago, but we'll go see what that is. It looks like we probably have some sort of like truncation going on. Looks like maybe we dropped a character. Shouldn't be too hard for me to find that because it should actually give me some indication in the page itself. It also looks like we've got something going on in the recipe extraction service. It says it's missing a using directive. Sometimes those can be a little tricky. Yeah, so I got a little bit of troubleshooting to do here. It's going to take me a second to really like poke around in the page. So I'm not going to do that here on video, but I will highlight what I find. Here's another tip. If I have trouble identifying what the error is and fixing it myself, I'm just going to basically take the error, stick it back over into Claude, and have him try to figure out what the error is and fix it. That works about 85% of the time, maybe 90% of the time. In this case, it probably would be pretty easy. It'd probably be easier for me to just feed the error over to him and have him figure it out. But I'm just going to go and take a quick scan and see if I can sort it out. So here's the first issue. It doesn't like this less than character here because we're in an HTML file. Even though we're in the scripts section, it seems to think that it should be HTML syntax instead of this is an operators like a comparison. I'm thinking I may just need to do an escape character here. So that's just adding another. No, that wasn't it. So this is one I'll probably let Claude try to figure out. So let me shoot him this error, see what happens. And to do that, I snip out the error using a snipping tool, paste it in and say, we have compilation error. You can also say we have a build error. It's all basically the same thing. And what I'll do is I'll put in the snip of the error itself. And then I also like to include a little snip of the line of code because Claude can actually see the little error indicators. And it says the issue is with the text block inside the JavaScript section. Yeah, kind of knew that. Yeah, I see. So you have to use this qualifier here for these. I have my doubts. This might be right. It might be totally red herring, but let me see what happens. We're going to paste it over and see. I don't love it. Now we've got a warning for this whole section. So now I don't know if that section is going to work. But this is how it goes. So the next thing I'm going to do is try to sort out these other two errors. So I'm going to just grab those and not waste time. I'll shoot them over and see if Claude can figure those out as well. Okay, in this case, he had to do a little bit more. He says he saw the issue. It looks like he fixed the code in the recipe extraction service. We'll copy that and we will place that code as well. Now it says there are no issues. We'll see how it goes. In fact, I'm just not even going to pause. We're going to go and ahead and try to run it. I have my doubts about the changes on the index file. That's a lot of warnings, and it makes me wonder if that script is actually going to run. Like I said, I have my doubts. We'll see. But we should at least get a build. We did. We got a successful build. And we have a page. 1 second, I'm just going to pause this and go to the page, but we're actually on the page. Great. Okay, so now you can see we just fixed those few compilation errors and boom, it worked. Okay, I have an access code. Let's just take a moment to look at the page here. Torque a P, clean recipe extraction, extract recipe, privacy and terms. It shouldn't let me do this without adding my access code, so I clicked it. Yeah, you can't get there. I'm going to pop in my access code. It says validate access. Access granted. It gives me the countdown I looked for. I got 23 hours and 59 minutes, 54 seconds. That's pretty cool. Try not to be, this is an experiment. I'm not trying to hurt your business, guys. So we're gonna hit extract. Okay. I immediately got an API error here. Not found. I mean, that could be any number of things. I'm looking right here. It looks like I got a 404 error, so I'm just looking into my errors list here. It's just not a very clear error. It's a 404 error. I've had to troubleshoot these things a number of times. I'm not going to do that right this moment. I'm actually going to pause. I am getting totally baked here on this window. I'm going to take a break. I'll come back in another session and we'll quickly figure out what's going on here with the API. So we got the sun out of the way now, and I'm back with the session. And the first thing I did is I put a breakpoint here where basically it builds up the API call for Claude, for Sonnet. And then I did a test run. You can see that going on here. And I didn't actually hit my breakpoint. So that means it failed before it got to the breakpoint. And as I was looking at the error, here's what I saw. It actually failed on a different HTTP request. And so I hadn't actually done a code review, but one thing I can see that Claude is doing is he's using a separate request to go get all the page content from the recipe page, which is problematic because a lot of those pages are probably taking steps to prevent that sort of action from being taken. Okay, so I just went to Claude and I said, hey, in lines 54 through 67 of the recipe extraction service, you're looking like you're making a separate direct HTTP request for the page content of the URL. This has failed in multiple attempts with different errors like unfound or forbidden. This isn't that surprising to me. Remember, we did a test where you as a web browsing model were able to extract the recipe without this separate non-generative effort. I'm just going to point this out to him, see what he says. So he's thinking. Okay, so he says, you're absolutely right. I was overcomplicating this by trying to fetch the web page content separately, which often fails due to bot protection, rate limiting, or access restrictions. Since we proved that Claude's web browsing capability can handle this directly, let's simplify the service and just send the URL to Claude and let it do the web fetching. That's exactly what I wanted it to do. So we're going to let him do that code now. We'll paste the code back over, and we should hopefully get a better result. Okay, so something different happened. So this time we got a different error. It said unable to extract the recipe. So that might be different. I think that might have actually been a successful API call. Looks like we maybe have a different error. So I'm just scanning through my errors here to just see if I got a positive response. Oh wow, it did. It got it back. So I actually can see the recipe here in my my debug. Yeah, and I got a 200 response back from the API. So this is good. We're actually getting a successful call to the API, and it is actually bringing back the recipe. So something probably pretty small is happening at this point. Like it's trying to do something with the JSON, and maybe it's failing. Maybe it's failing something with the JSON reader. Yeah, this is really good. We just did a major milestone where we made a successful call to the Claude API. We got back a recipe, and something failed in trying to render that to the page. I'm going to pause here, and we're going to see if we can sort that out. And the best way to do that, because I was reading through and it was saying something about invalid character at the beginning of a thing. It's like those little things like that can take you forever to try to troubleshoot on your own. So I just grabbed the output from my debug window, and I'm just going to paste that into Claude and see if Claude can figure out exactly what's going on here. So all I did is I came in and I said, hey, Claude, excellent news. I like to tell him when we've actually hit a milestone, because if he knows that we hit a milestone, then he can keep track of how we're progressing and he won't try to do something over again that he's already done. So I said, hey, Claude, excellent news. We had a successful call to the Claude Sonnet 4 API, and I can see the output that the model did properly return the recipe. Unfortunately, something appears to be going wrong when rendering the recipe to the page. See output. And so I give him that output, and we see what Claude's going to do. I'll move this out of the way for now. Okay, he says, great news, the API call worked. I can see the issue clearly. Claude is returning the JSON wrapped in markdown code blocks, but your JSON parser expects pure JSON. Let me fix the parsing in the recipe extraction service to handle this. This is the kind of thing that is really good to have Claude actually do the debugging here. That is the kind of thing that could have taken me a while to remedy. Like if I was doing this, I would have been in Stack Overflow poking around potentially for, half an hour, I don't know. It could have taken me a while, but this is the kind of thing that's just really helpful to be able to have Claude help you do the debugging. So we're going to, and he tells me what he fixed. Yeah, detects markdown formatting, checks for JSON, or checks for these symbols at the start, strips those code blocks. Yeah, it just needs clean JSON. So I'm going to grab this code and we're going to go from there. Again, as I tell you, it's good to have some understanding of code. I mean, I was able to at least understand the error had something to do with the JSON and it wasn't rendering properly. So, I had a clue, but again, these little things can be kind of gnarly. And even if I could have figured out exactly what the problem was, I would not have necessarily known the right fix. So hopefully Claude has come up with the fix and we'll see how it goes. Okay, I've pasted those changes and we're going to give it another run. Fingers crossed. And it is extracting the recipe. Come on. Bam! Yes! Success! We got it! Look at this. This is so cool. It gives me the title of the recipe, gives me these cook times, gives me the ingredients, gives me the instructions. Look how pretty that is. Actually rendered really well. Added some notes. I have the original URL, so here's what it did. It gave me attribution and it gave me the cost. It failed on the image, but that's okay. This is actually a really good outcome. It will not be hard to figure out why it's not rendering the image here. I am just going to really quickly just do an inspect on that element to see what's going on with the image. I mean, it's got the source. So what I found is when I copy the image URL and I just go right to browser and paste it in, it is actually not finding. It's getting a page not found for that JPEG. So I don't know where it got that URL from. It's clearly not working. I don't know. It could be also that like that URL has permissions or rights on it that we don't have. So I'm just gonna have to do a little more troubleshooting on the image and maybe have him find a different URL or like a different version of the image somewhere. This is something that could, with enough work and enough refinement, and perhaps maybe being coded in a way that it could scale, this could be monetized. If you were gonna put this out to the general public and try to monetize it, you would want to have a different API account than what I have. I've got the pro account, but you'd hit rate limits, so you'd have to have something that doesn't have the rate limits, or at least way different rate limits. Another thing is you'd have to have some consciousness of the fact that this is content that is theoretically copyrighted in some other place. That said, I know for a fact there are apps in the App Store that do, like mobile apps, that do very much the thing that I'm doing right now. And they were able to get approved. And so they must be dealing with this in some way. So it's not unthinkable. And I don't know, I think there's another way, like I think those are subscription oriented models, or they're buying like recipes in batches. You buy like 500, 100 recipes or 600 recipes. But think about that. That's because they must be paying for the tokens. Otherwise, doing things on a unit basis doesn't make that much sense. You'd do something else. One way to probably monetize it without going the subscription route would be just to stick a donate button on there. Put it out there, let people use it. If you're not getting enough donations to cover your token cost with the model, then you just shut it down and think about it again and figure out a different way to monetize it, or just don't monetize it. But I think this is the thing is like with enough work, some adding some features, getting it ready to scale, which by the way may also not just involve your beefing up your API throughput. It might also involve like going at this with different thread management, depending on how many people might be using this thing at any given point in time. Now, the cool thing is I actually think Claude would be able to help you with thread management to make it more efficient in terms of like multiple users doing things at the same time. And caching. In fact, I remember early on Claude talking about caching certain recipes so that if someone's trying to get a recipe or going to a website, a URL that already exists, you don't want to go and get that again. You already have it. So it makes tons of sense that you could continue to iterate on this and it could be monetized. For me, it's just a fun thing. I'm going to continue to iterate on it. I'm going to add some features. At minimum, I'm going to let some friends use it. I'm going to use it because I don't want to go and navigate these websites. And certainly I feel fully justified in putting in this work and doing something that I just get a direct benefit from. One last thing. Now that I have a working application, I am going to put the version in my repository. And as I have new iterations, I add features and they're functional, I will continue to do version management in my repository. That is just Dev 101. If you do not do that, you are bound to lose good work because as you put more features in, something invariably is going to go wrong. And if you did not save those versions and you're not able to fall back and build from a previously working version, you're probably going to be in a situation where you may even have to start over. It's possible. So my final tip is it is vibe coding, but it is still coding. And you need to adhere to some basic dev standards. And versioning is one that I highly recommend. That's it. We'll catch you next time.